Good evening and welcome everybody. Myself Vishal Dhanuka. Today we are all here to discuss about how we are implementing TDS on purchase of goods. I will be guiding you out through the workflow and the scenarios that we have catered or managed in the system. We will be taking up the questions at the end of the session. So initially, please allow me to go through the explanations and all. And in case of any doubts, I hope most of the doubts will get clear during this course of time. And in case of any queries, please take a note of those and we will be taking those out at the end of the session. So for the time being, I will be sharing my screen so that I can guide you through the visual flow. Is the screen visible?
Yes, Vishal, it's visible.
So let's start. So TDS on purchase of goods, as most of us will now be aware of that from 1st of July, government has changed the statutory rules with respect to tax deduction at source on goods purchase, on purchase of goods rather, you can see. So on every purchase of goods now, the government is saying that the buyer will have to deduct a tax at the time of payment of those invoices. So what the statutory law is now saying, the government is saying that any person being a buyer who is responsible for paying any sum to the seller for purchase of any goods of the value or aggregate of such value exceeding 50 lakhs in an accounting year shall at the time of credit of such amount to the account of the seller or at the time of payment thereof by any mode, whichever is earlier, has to deduct an amount equal to 0.1% as income tax. So this is what the law is stating, that TDS needs to be deducted. So basic highlight, if you can sum up this out in few points, then it's under section 194Q that the rule is getting implemented and will be effected from 1st of July 2021. That is already been applied. It's been on purchase of goods, and there is an exception that the government has provided that if any transaction or if any buyer or seller transacts for a value of less than 50 lakhs in an accounting year, then they won't be applied for this tax regime. That means TDS for those vendors need not be deducted. And in case the limits cross 50 lakhs, then it will be charged at 0.1%. So moving ahead now, how we are going to, or how we have implemented this in Ginesys. So as we all know that while defining TDS information, we generally used to start with the setup in finance module, that is for TDS, where we have three different modules with respect to TDS source, TDS section, and TDS agencies. TDS source and TDS agency has no such differences or changes as was existing. We are keeping it same. But in TDS section master, that is in TDS section definition, we have introduced a new field for type. That is, this TDS is being defined either for goods or services. So we have added a field over here for categorizing this TDS section, that is, it will be applicable for goods or for services. So post update, master creation for section 194Q has to be done manually. I hope most of you have already done this. And the type for that master will be goods. All the existing master that has been already created for deduction of TDS with respect to services will be automatically migrated with type as services. So these are the only two types that can be selected over here, that can be goods or services. And with respect to goods, a new master needs to be created. Over here, all the different sources that is required can be met, like corporates, in non-corporates, or individuals, or as per your vendor categorization. You can select the TDS sources that's been applied for that TDS section. And effective from 1st of July, the TDS rate needs to be defined over here. We need to keep a note that the TDS rate provided over here will be 0.1%. I will show you, guide you through the modules even, so that we can have a better view of understanding. So over here in TDS section definition, as I've said, we have introduced a column for TDS type. From the list page also we can see that TDS type column has been provided, from which we can segregate that the TDS master that has been created is for goods or services. As we can see, I have already defined a section for purchase of goods with the type of selected as goods, where we can tag multiple sources for which TDS can be deducted, and with effect from 1st of July, TDS rate needs to be defined over here, that is 0.1%. For all the services, for all the different sources, we need to select it over here separately and define this TDS rate over here. So moving on from here, the next comes the vendor master, vendor on whom the TDS is being charged on. So basically, in vendor master, we need to define that whether this vendor is TDS applicable or not. There is a flag in finance tab under subtab for TDS, that whether TDS is applicable for this vendor. As of now, most of you won't be marking this TDS applicable for the vendors. Those are providing goods to you. But in case of services, it might have been that you already know that TDS applicable needs to be done for services. So it's nothing changed over here. TDS applicable option was there already, and we are just marking this as applicable for the supplier of goods even. Over here, we are also providing option for view of that whether the TDS name that has been selected is of type goods or services, so that we can segregate it over here. And the exception limit, that is the value of 50 lakhs that the government is saying that within that limit, TDS won't be charged or won't be applicable for that vendor. So exception limit needs to be defined over here. And there is a catch over here. I will come to this soon, but let us see the UI so that more clarity can be there. I have already created a demo master. So moving directly to the finance TDS tab. So we can see over here that I marked this as TDS applicable and specified the source as individual. You can select it from the list, whatever being applicable. So I marked it as individual. We can see over here that the column for TDS type is also been provided. So if you want to view that what type of, or check what type of TDS I've mapped with this vendor, you can select it from this column list. And we can see that over here exceptions can be defined. Now the point over here is we need to define exceptions for every year. For current year and even for next year. As you can see, I have defined two records. One is for current year and another is for next year. The max limit you can see on the screen for current year, as I have not given 50 lakhs. It's something 3,75,000, and for the next year I have specified as 50 lakhs. The reason behind this is that already from the month of April, the accounting has been started, and billing might have been progressed for the same vendor from the month of April to June. So the value of that limit of total bill amount needs to be deducted from the total limit of 50 lakhs and has to be specified over here. So this is the catch that I was saying previously, that the max limit for current year may not be 50 lakhs for all the vendors. So in case of new vendors getting added, it will be straightforward 50 lakhs. But for the vendors from whom purchase has already been made during this year, that is from the for the month of April, May or June, that for those vendors the limit will be reduced with the bill amount that's already been raised. Like suppose billing for 10 lakh is already been done for those vendors in the first quarter, then the limit over here needs to be specified as 40 lakhs only. That is 50 lakhs minus the bill value, that is 10 lakhs. So 50 minus 10, 40 lakhs needs to be specified over here. What I have assumed in my example over here, that is 46 lakh 25,000 billing has been already been done in this period, and only 3 lakh 75,000 has been pending from 1st of July. So the my limit to be covered within this accounting year pending is 3 lakh 75,000. And from 1st of April 2022, it will be again 50 lakhs. So this need to be taken care of while defining the masters, as we might get confused that define 50 lakhs for each and every vendors initially. So moving ahead, the limit defining scenarios, as I've already stated, that in case of new vendor post 1st of July, the exceptional limit will be 50 lakh directly. But in case of existing vendors who had not crossed 50 lakhs, it might happen that already the billing value is crossed 50 lakhs. So for the vendors whose billing is not yet crossed 50 lakhs, in that case 50 lakhs minus invoice value raised will be assigned as the exception. In the example, as I've shown, 3,75,000 is my pending value that for which exception is being can be availed, is being assigned over there. And in case the billing value is already crossed 50 lakhs for this accounting year in the first quarter only, then exception may not be defined. You can even skip the definition of exception for this year, because for all the bills going forward, you need to apply or deduct TDS. So we have to note that every year exception limit has to be defined for each vendor, and from next accounting year, irrespective of the condition limit, unless and until government changes the limit, so 50 lakhs needs to be defined for each vendor. I hope I'm not going too quick or I'm not in a hurry. So in case if you feel like that I need to go slow, you can ping me out. So moving ahead, that's how we are deriving TDS rate. Means as we have defined, there are two different places. One is the TDS section definition, where we are defining TDS rate as 0.1%. Another is the vendor master exception list, where we are calculating or defining TDS rate as 0 up to the exception limit. So there come two different categories of rate. One is 0 and one is 0.1%. So how are we calculating this limit, and where is this fetching from? So the TDS rates get derived based on the vendor amount, vendor applicable amount, that is the sum of TDS applicable amount from the purchase invoice, TDS journal and TDS reversal entries. So we are adding up the TDS applicable amount for PI and already generated TDS journals. And in case of any TDS reversal entries being made, we are deducting the value of those plus the existing invoice applicable amount. We are summing this all to derive the vendor applicable check amount. So it might happen already PI has been made for say 20 lakhs rupees. It might happen that separate TDS journal has been raised with respect to advance payment, that is from AP voucher, say 10 lakhs of rupees, and against that a reversal of rupees 50,000 has been raised from TDS reversal. So in that case, we can see that 20 and 10, 30 minus 5, that is 25 lakhs is already been booked. So we will check that the current TD invoice value is either exceeding that plus 25 lakhs plus the current invoice value is exceeding the limit or not. In case the value exceeds the exception limit, or if it's within the exception limit, then TDS rate will be populated as 0. And in case it exceeds the exception limit, then it will be calculating as 0.1%. The catch is over here that TDS calculation will be on the existing TDS applicable amount for all the invoices that is being raised for the TDS general that is being made previously minus the TDS reversal that is being adjusted. And after this calculation, the current invoice value will be checked out. I hope I've been able to make this clear. Moving ahead with this, now comes the purchase invoice, the final point from where the TDS is getting generated. So this is from the purchase invoice form. Before that, I would like to also point out some changes with respect to charges. That I have termed over here TDS applicable amount. Now, what is TDS applicable amount is also a point to catch over here. Like it might happen, people might say that the quantity and the rate, the multiplied value of quantity and rate is the basic value will be the TDS applicable amount. But whereas it's been set on the total value, bill value, it can be the TDS applicable amount. So we have kept it open to the organizations that who are deducting the TDS. If they want, they can calculate it on the gross value, that is on the quantity multiplied by rate of the items purchased. If they want, they can add up all the charges or the value of the charges that is from the with the gross amount to calculate TDS on net amount. So how can this be done? How can charges be made applicable or not? That's what we are controlling from the term master. So moving with this term master, we can check it out that we have been providing over here with the checkbox for including TDS. It's been left open. If you want to include this charge in calculation of TDS, you can mark this as ticked. If you want to exclude this charge from calculation of TDS, you can mark this as unticked. So the TDS applicable amount will be the gross amount plus all the charge amount that is been marked as included in TDS, that will be considered as including TDS. I will show an example with respect to this. But over here, I hope I am able to make this clear that you can control the charges, whether those are needed to be applied on TDS or not. You can control this with this flag over here in term master that is need to be included or not. And this can also be modified in the transaction, that is purchase invoice. If you want to change from no to yes or yes to no, you can sorry, you can do it from transaction form even. So now moving ahead to the purchase invoice. So we have added a new block altogether for with respect to TDS information. Under the general block, we can see there is a block provided for TDS information, which will be reflecting the field values with respect to TDS, that is whether the vendor is TDS applicable or not, whether what is the source applied to that vendor, what TDS name are being selected for selection of purchase invoice, or what is the section under which the TDS is getting booked. Out of these 4 fields, you can see that three has been disabled and only one TDS name selection field is being enabled. So with respect to this, I would like to say that TDS applicable and TDS source, as we have already seen that we are marking those information in the vendor master. So on selection of vendor, this TDS applicable will get populated from that source and we won't be able to modify it over here. Changes with respect to this flag has been restricted. If you want not to apply TDS, then you have to change it in the vendor master. Now it might happen that same vendor is providing goods and services both. So TDS has to be marked for yes with for both the vendors, sorry, for that vendor. And in case it's required, or it might be that TDS needs not to be deducted or required to be deducted for either of the goods or services. So in that case, exception needs to be defined for those TDS names in the vendor master. So according to the exceptions defined, system will automatically track it out that whether TDS will be deducted or not. But obviously, TDS applicable should be marked as yes for that vendor. irrespective of whether it's been charged for TS goods is or it's been charged for services. Only in case that the vendor is specifically providing any services for which TDS is not applied, and he is not providing services for goods, or is not selling goods to us, then in case we can mark those as not applicable. But in either of the scenario, if he's providing goods, then TDS applicable should be marked as yes. So let's see how we are getting this view over here. I've created a few demo entries. You can check this out from with respect to demo. We have provided a panel information where we are reflecting this TDS information. So we can see over here the TDS applicable amount is 3,50,000. That is the gross amount. You can see that is quantity into rate, the value of all the items, that is quantity into rate. The gross amount 3,50,000 is been displayed as TDS applicable amount, and the TDS charge amount, that is 17,000. Now we can see over here that all the charge value, sum of all the charge value 17,000. We can go and check it out for the charges, that whether TDS is marked as yes or no. So it's been said that TDS included as yes, hence it's been considered as TDS charge amount. So all the charges which are marked as yes will be considered as TDS charge amount, and the TDS net amount, that is the total amount on which the TDS will be charged, is been displayed as TDS net amount, that is TDS applicable amount plus TDS charge amount. So 3,50,000 plus 17,367 is the TDS net amount. Always the TDS rate will be applied and TDS amount will get generated. So as for this example, as I have already stated that we have seen that I have applied a exception limit of 3,75,000, and this was the first invoice raised thereafter, which is within that exception limit. So TDS rate applied over here is 0%. So accordingly, hence TDS amount is 0, for which TDS is not being deducted or TDS is not being charged in this invoice. Similarly, if I go to the next invoice for this vendor, that is 1,2, you can check it over here. The invoice value for this bill is 1,35,000, which is exceeding heavily from the pending amount. Means the pending amount with respect to previous bill was within the exception limit was 8,000, and the next bill that I have generated is 1,35,000. So in this case, we can see that the TDS rate has been derived as per the section definition 0.1%, and TDS amount is calculated as per TDS net amount, that is 1,35,000. One assumption we have taken over here, that in case of differential adjustment, that is say 8,000 was been pending for exception limit, so we can't create differential TDS over here. So TDS will be charged on the full amount of the invoice in case it exceeds the exception limit. So over here we need to keep this in mind. If required, or if such anything happens, and if we can break the invoice, or if we can distribute the invoice goods into, or there is a lower value invoice pending to be done, so we can do that ahead of this invoice where the exception limit is getting crossed, so that we can avail the benefit of that value even. But if in a given invoice, if the exception limit is getting crossed, then TDS will be deducted on the total invoice value and not on the differential value. So this is the basic assumption over here which we have made with respect to invoice, and the same logic is being applied while creation of service invoice even, that we are following for so many years. So this is how we have portrayed the things. So auto creation of TDS journal is, if purchase invoice is TDS applicable, then on release of any document, it's like that we already know that there are two steps of creation of purchase invoice. One is while you are saving and then authorizing that purchase invoice, that is releasing, marking that purchase invoice as released. So TDS journal will be deducted or will be raised at the time of release of invoice and not at the point of saving. So at the point of release, if TDS, any TDS entry is found pending, then is not found pending, then it will create a TDS journal entry where system will ask you for the TDS journal numbering scheme. That is, there can be multiple numbering scheme being applied. So user will have to select that which numbering scheme you wants to opt for creation of TDS document. And thereafter, with respect to that numbering scheme, auto entry will be created and adjusted with this purchase invoice. Now, it might happen that some advance payments are being received or being made to the vendor, and TDS is deducted for those advance payment also. So in case TDS journal is been already created from advance payment, then at the time of creation of purchase invoice, those TDS journals which are pending to be adjusted will be reflected for adjustment first. It might happen that a single TDS journal gets satisfied with the TDS amount for this invoice, or it might happen that it requires multiple TDS journals to satisfy the total TDS value did charge for this invoice. So as with the applicability, you can select either one or two or multiple. It might also happen that the pending TDS amount, total pending TDS amount is still lower than the TDS applicable for this invoice. So in that case, the differential pending amount, suppose the total TDS amount pending to be adjusted is say 500 rupees, and I want to charge TDS, deduct TDS say 800 rupees for this invoice, then the differential value of 300 will be created. So TDS journal entry for 300 will be created with respect to this invoice. I hope I am able to make this clear, that partial adjustment if pending will be done, and in case of any difference still exists after adjustment, then new entry or pending TDS journal entry will be created. So moving ahead with this, so I've already discussed these changes in charge item, as I've already shown you that TDS including TDS option has been there, depending upon which the value of that charges has been included in that TDS calculation. Then there is a panel information which I have also discussed, that there are multiple informations for TDS that can be selected. After saving off or generation of the TDS entry, we can view the TDS information from the list page also. We have added columns with respect to TDS information over here. You can see in the column panels TDS applicable, yes, no, and accordingly thereafter there are other fields like TDS amount, source, name, section. So if required, you can select it over here and view the details for each and every records been charged. So we can see over here that for these two invoices, for one which is within the limit, TDS amount is 0, and for the one which is exceeding the limit, the TDS amount has been charged as 0.1%, rounding off to the upper value, that is 136 rupees. So TDS journal is same as we know that it's been already there in the finance module, and the generation process with respect to TDS journal is almost similar with as we have seen with respect to service invoice. There will be the auto generation references in remarks, in the header as well as in detail information. The PI number will be reflected in the reference column, and rest information with respect to TDS name, agency, etc. will get populated from purchase invoice, for which TDS value is getting deducted. The TDS applicable amount, rate and all will get populated as been displayed in the panel information for the TDS journal getting generated. So to summarize this up, there are 6 steps so which we can apply this deduction of TDS. First is to create the TDS section with types as goods, then define the rate for each applicable sources, that is at the rate of 0.1% as per present specifications. Then in vendor master, we have to mark TDS applicable with the source selected, and exceptions if required for the current year, if not yet exhausted, then needs to be defined with respect to the vendor at 0%. So it was many, I received many calls that were, still the TDS rate is being deducted after specification of exceptions. So many of us are doing the mistake that we are providing TDS rate in vendor master as 0.1%. We'll have to note that in vendor master exception list, the rate needs to be specified as 0%. That is the exception rate, that is TDS won't be charged. In that case, 0% need to be specified in vendor master. While creation of purchase invoice, select the TDS name. Might get auto-populated from vendor master even if it's been tagged directly or a single value found. And then in case of release of purchase invoice, TDS general document number and scheme needs to be selected for creation of auto-generated entries. So this is the simple 6 steps through which we can apply this 194Q section in Ginesys and deduct TDS for purchase of all the goods that has been done from 1st of July 2021. Well, to apply all these changes, we have made some assumptions and exceptions in order to make things easier and to understand and to work on. So these assumptions are as noted. So it's been, while defining the rule, it's been said that the organization turnover limit for previous year should be 10 crores. Now we in Ginesys are not validating this limit of 10 crores that our turnover is been 10 crore in the previous year or not. As an organization, we all know that we have crossed the limit, right? Is yes or no. So in case we have not done, then we need not to mark vendors at TDS applicable for any of the cases. And if it's been done, we have to mark it as yes. So this has to be self-validated and in check with respect to TDS configuration in vendor master has to be done. So once it's been done, we will charge TDS for all the vendors, irrespective whether the previous year turnover of our organization has crossed 10 crores or not. So the first assumption is we are not validating this limit of turnover or that is 10 crores. Second point is exception limit is not validating on advance payment. That is in case of AP voucher, as we have already known that existing working behavior of AP vouchers used to calculate the TDS rate as per the section definition. While there is an options provided to populate the exception limit or the exception rate. But in that case also, it doesn't checks or it doesn't validates the limit being crossed or not. If user opts for exception rate, then system directly populates it over there, irrespective of whether the limit is still pending or the limit has been crossed. So AP voucher, no changes has been made with respect to the functional behavior of AP voucher to validate the exception limit. It's working same as earlier, that by default it will consider the rate from TDS section definition. And if user opts for an exceptional rate, then it won't validate the limit. The third point is the unregistered vendor needs to be handled by self-definition. Now, who is an unregistered vendor? It's in the definition. It's been said that any vendor who has not been filing ITR or doesn't have a PAN number has been said as unregistered vendor. For those vendor, TDS rates need to be applied at 5% directly and straight, irrespective of any exception, irrespective of TDS rule stating that 0.1%. From day one, 5% TDS is to be deducted for those unregistered vendors. So we are not handling this with respect to any specification. We can suggest that if the vendor is unregistered, you need to create a different source for unregistered vendor and tag it with respect to that vendor source. And TDS rate for that source needs to be marked as 5%, so that calculation will directly be done at 5%. So this all definition with respect to unregistered vendor has to be applied with yourself inclination, that is the self-definition, needs to be done for this purpose. System won't automatically redirect that the PAN number is not provided or not defined in vendor master, so it will cater as 5% or not. So that has been assumption that it has to be self-managed by the users. The next point is purchase invoice in which exception limit is crossed with parcel value. I have already discussed this at the time of displaying purchase invoice, that partial adjustment is not been done in Ginesys with respect to any differential value. If the invoice value is crossing the exception limit, TDS will be charged on full amount. The next point is purchase invoice made against any advance payment. It might be said that advance payment was made earlier and in that TDS is deducted. At the time of purchase invoice, again TDS is getting deducted for that invoice. So in this case, TDS will be charged on that invoice, and if journal is in pending to be adjusted, can be adjusted. But it's not like that the TDS won't be charged on that invoice. TDS will be charged on this current bill, and pending TDS journal, if there, can be adjusted. But charge, it won't be like that TDS won't be charged. It will be done over the in purchase invoice also. Both inventory and non-inventory items are considered under this taxation, as there is no separate rule mentioned in government specification that non-inventory items will not be booked under this regime. Next is TDS journal or reversal against purchase return or debit note or credit note are not automated yet. So if anything requires, has to be done manually. That is, TDS reversal entry has to be booked with respect to TDS purchase return or debit note, anything if requires. Now this was on from the purchaser side. From seller side of view, if TDS been charged by the buyer, so TDS if deducted by the buyer, then the seller needs to account for the advance tax paid. This entry needs to be done manually. That is again self-initiated while preparing AR, while the credit journal entry document needs to be created. So again, this seller side view for respect to the TDS is not being automated in the system. This has to be manually done. So this is all from my side. I hope I've been able to resolve many of your queries. Still, in case there are some, I can see over here there are some chat notifications.
We have one question from Avinash.
Okay.
I think you can read it out, you'll understand it better.
Currently, we are using, so Avinash is saying that currently we are using Ginesys version 11.153.10, and in TDS section definition module have only one date field is effective from. As per your current TDS section definition module, there are two date fields. So now my question is it applicable for both type of TDS? Goods and services, yes, it's applicable for both type of TDS. Avinash, I guess I have made things clear that we have introduced a type option over there that is for goods and services, and at the point of defining, you can mark this TDS section for a goods or a service. One TDS section cannot be applied for both, but the date option that is effective from date that will be provided will be applied for that respective goods section or service section individually, and it's been done for both.
Okay, so I think on question answer part, that was all. Is there anything else that you want to conclude with, Vishal?
So the thing is, the only point of concern that I have received many of the queries with during this period is with respect to definition of TDS rate. That I've said that section definition should be 0.1%, and in vendor master exception rate should be 0%. So that is, many of the client is getting confused that where which rate needs to be defined and getting switched with different combinations. So that we should keep in mind. And the next point is defining the maximum limit or the exception limit for this current year. This current year exception limit should be the value deducting the invoices already raised during the first quarter, that is April, May, and June. So there's that those value or the sum of those value needs to be deducted from the 50 lakhs, and then the pending value need to be specified for this year. Going forward for the next year, the entire 50 lakhs, unless until changed by the government, should be specified. And it's a suggestion that you can define for current and next year at a time for any vendor at present. So next year it won't be a headache to define and won't be a confusion that which amount needs to be defined. So in case of any other queries or doubts, you can ask me out, or we can end the session over here.
Okay. So in any ways, if there is any questions, they can connect with their account managers, right?
Yeah, surely. That will be better. In case of any doubts or anything, you can either move to account managers and can discuss the details with them. They will guide you out with the best possible way.
And thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Thank you so much, Vishal.